My god, it's so hot. It's so hot. Something is not right. Have you noticed that we've greenwashed ourselves to death? Have you noticed that? Let's dive into this. What is greenwashing? What are we doing to this planet? Why are we doing this to the planet? And who is guilty of it all? Is it you and me, or is it not you and me? You know how they always kept saying, oh, we need to make sure that we stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius in terms of its heating and, the planet climate crisis, all of those things. And I've heard about this for like decades now. And I was like, wait, did we succeed? And no, we didn't. Apparently, we failed so miserably. It is criminal. It is criminal. You see, the year 2023 and then 2024 and this year 2025 are actually some of the not some of the hottest, they are the hottest years on record, and not in a way that is like hot, oh cutesy, no, hot in a way that the planet is dying and we're all boiling with it. And it's kind of crazy because we've had this amazing Paris Agreement that went apparently nowhere because all of these companies and leaders were like, yeah, 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 greenwashing us, and they did nothing at all and blamed us, the consumers, the people. So let's figure out what is greenwashing in general and what happened. No, this episode is not about like, oh, we all have to switch to tote bags and metal straws and yada, yada, yada. It's not about that. It's about the fact that we have seen one of the best, truly one of the most remarkable PR and marketing campaigns ever created. Ever. And low-key, it's amazing, but high-key, it was done for the worst reasons. So let's start with the 1.5 degrees Celsius target, right? What is it and who even came up with that? Scientists, very smart people all across the world were like, hey, so the planet is boiling, all of these carbon emissions from cars, factories, everyday, like agriculture, all of those things keeps, rising up, and like the planet doesn't feel right. And the scientists were like, hey, if we don't go above 1.5 degrees Celsius overheating, then we're fine. We can scale it all back, we can cool down the planet and get to a pre-industrial levels, which is, what we kind of want. And that didn't happen because nobody listened to the scientists. Because when do people listen to scientists? Because people are stupid. Listen to scientists, you guys. Actual scientists. There's this organization called IPCC that is basically like the Avengers of climate. They're like, hey, we even came up with a plan. We even came up with like funding and all these like amazing tools and solutions that could help the world reach that target. But the leaders of countries, the leaderships of companies, and everyone who has the power to actually do something about it was like, yeah, meh, don't care, because the money, money, money. So the emissions kept rising up and rising up and rising up. And according to United Nations Environment Program, emissions gap reports that global greenhouse emissions have skyrocketed to a record high in 2024, reaching 58 gigatons. 58 gigatons. Like, I don't think there is even a way to visualize this because it's such a massive amount. In fact, that was a 2% growth from a year prior to 2023. And we've yet to see the data for 2025, and I'm sure, well, I don't know, but I'm sure it's not going to be good. Oh, side note, I'm not a climate scientist. I'm not. I'm just a concerned citizen who's like, wait, what is going on with our planet? I started looking into all of this and I was like, wait, I kind of want to share that with you guys because maybe you will care. So all of these organizations like UN and others, they were like, yes, 1.5 degrees Celsius, 1.5 degrees Celsius, and nobody listened. In fact, the UN Secretary General was like, you guys, this is a moral failure, not just like financial or technological or whatever that may be. It's a moral failure on the humans. So how did we get here, right? There is physics, there is, biology, there's geopolitics, there is science, all those good things. But there's one thing that people don't really think about, and it's greenwashing of it all, right? The fact that companies and governments and entities were allowed to put bogus claims and be like, oh, we're so sustainable or we're so green or whatever that may be without actually being that. Without actually having a mechanism to verify these claims. In fact, United Nations describes it as companies or institutions misleading people about how climate friendly they are. By using vague terms like eco-friendly, sustainable, and yada yada yada, and EU calls it false impression. So basically, it's a system level greenwashing that has been occurring on the part of so many organizations and everyone involved that it became like an institution, right? Because all these companies are like, by 2050, we're gonna reach net zero. By 2030, we're gonna reach whatever level. And like I said, zero accountability. There's zero accountability. No one is like, oh yeah, we're gonna check on that. No government is like, oh yeah, we're gonna look into this. Nobody seems to care. And companies cash in on this because we, the regular consumers, don't know. Right? We were told that if we recycle everything, the world will be green. We were told that if we switch to tote bags, the world will be green. But the thing is, every year and every year after, the world is not getting better in terms of climate change. Essentially, greenwashing, it bought time for all of these companies to get quicker buck and get richer and all of that by, pushing away all of these, metrics and concerns. And now we are essentially past that 1.5 degrees Celsius situation. And the likelihood of us fixing that is pretty much non existent if you think about it. Despite all of these companies being like, yeah, we're going to reach all of these beautiful levels of net zero and whatnot, they didn't do that. They, in fact, invested in the opposite. The investment in coal, the investment in oil, and other fossil fuel kind of, thingies that really burn and boil our planet has increased dramatically. Some countries, they're like, yeah, we're going to invest X amount into green energy, into green technology, and then they invest X amount more into fossil fuels. So essentially, while all of these leaders were like, yeah, the 1.5 degrees thingy is non-negotiable, the actual energy ministries were like, nah, guys, we're going to invest into more of this oil and gas stuff because we need that. Well, they need it. We don't really. By the way, solar, one of the greenest, most sustainable energies right now, is actually cheaper than coal. It's actually cheaper than oil if you think about it. So, and there's also subsidies. The International Energy Agency estimates that in 2022, subsidies alone into all of these fossil fuel thingies topped $1 trillion. $1 trillion. It's an insane amount of money. And then the IMF went even bigger. They say that if we count not only direct subsidies, but also the fact that we don't make fossil fuel companies pay for the health damage, for the environmental damage, right? Then that money investment or monetary lack of responsibility actually becomes $7 trillion. 7 times more. All of these companies have gotten so much from us. They've gotten our lives, they've gotten our bodies, they've gotten our taxes, they've gotten everything from us, and we got nothing in return. The thing is, all these companies, they get to buy these fossil fuel credits, right? Essentially, these credits, how do they work? If you're a company, you're like, wow, I'm polluting so much, but like, I'm gonna buy these fossil fuel credits, right? Essentially, you go to this organization that says, hey, give us money and we'll plant a bunch of trees so that way you offset what you have emitted. And on paper, it sounds kind of amazing, right? Like, it's a very easy way for companies to be more environmentally friendly, the quickest way, and then there's an opportunity to grow forests. Deforestation is something that our planet is experiencing at a rapid pace. So on paper, this idea sounds amazing. But the thing is, These fossil fuel credits, again, are provided by organizations that don't actually fulfill the promises. They don't actually plant the same amount of trees that they say they will. They don't actually contribute nearly as much as they claim they do. So the fossil fuel credit becomes essentially like a vanity thing for companies to be like, well, see, we're trying to be net zero. And again, they still emit CO2. It's not like these companies are like, yeah, we're going to buy these credits and we're going to stop our emissions. They don't do that. They don't. They're like, we're going to continue with our pumping oil, pumping gas kind of thing. Well, the planet is dying because, money is the most important thing ever. And looking back at all of these subsidies that, we the taxpayers are paying for, some countries, they've continuously increased subsidies for these CO2 companies. They keep opening new pipelines, new fracking locations, new drilling locations. Look at, some other very, 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 very big companies and very, very rich countries. They are still investing in all of this, despite the world being like, hey, can't you tell that the weather is abnormally hot? If you look at the Corporate Climate Responsibility Monitor report of 2023, which looked at 24 major global companies, they found that most of their net zero and carbon neutral claims were not only misleading, they lacked integrity and they literally lacked action. Literally, no action was done. Can you imagine? Imagine you go sell a product and you say, this product was made handmade with love and care. And then someone receives this product and they're like, yeah, I can tell it wasn't, but there is no way to prove it because the company's like, well. And another analysis by Influence Map found that majority of the biggest companies contribute to, if you look at I think they said 1,000 or something. I forgot how many companies, but they said essentially that more than half of them contributes 90% of all CO2. It's insane. Insane. And then of course there is other thing that I was researching and I was like, wait, let's look at this COP. It's this global conference that creates a space for all of these companies and governments and entities to get together and really think about how to tackle climate crisis. But the thing is, it seems like these COP conferences are basically networking events for fossil fuel executives because if you look at the statistics, majority of the people or majority of the entities that go to these events, they're not Greenpeace, they're not organizations that are fighting for clean air or fighting for clean water and energy. They are lobbyists from gas companies, oil companies, and everything in between that keeps poisoning our planet. Between 2021 and 2024, about 5,000 lobbyists attended these conferences. Lobbyists from all kinds of companies went to these climate conferences and they were still pushing for fossil fuels. They were not pushing for, actual transition in a way. They were not pushing for actually taking real tough steps into implementation of green policies. They were like, yeah, we're just gonna chit chat here, drink out of a cup that is biodegradable, and then go and drill another hole on Earth and get more oil out of it. Essentially, these summits are basically, a bunch of selfies and vibes and events and carefully drafted texts that mean nothing in the end, right? Look at Paris Agreement. We failed so badly. Even though Paris Agreement at the time was hailed as one of the most profound and most important and consequential global agreements ever in terms of climate. And we have failed already. And then to be fair, there was still some regulation, of course, governments at some point were like, wait, maybe we should do something. Maybe we should enforce some of these laws and regulations and really try to rein in. But again, it's always too little too late. It really is, because the damage was already done. The generations have grown up in this kind of environment, and now you're gonna enforce the laws. For example, European Union was working on cracking down on these greenwashed claims, making sure, for example, with one of the tech companies, EU was like, hey, you cannot say that this is carbon neutral, because in reality it wasn't actually carbon neutral. So EU was like, no, 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 remove that, right? So they're doing that, but again, it's a little too late. It's like y'all could have done that way earlier and you chose not to. I think one of the key things that really messed everything up and why greenwashing is really bad in terms of like societal impact, not just financial or ecological impact. It's bad because it has muted our reaction as people, right? We were fed these beautiful words and phrases and all these good things like, oh, we're gonna reach it by 2050. And because it was always pushed away, we the people were like, yeah, we're gonna reach that. We feel like we will, yeah. Like, think about it this way: if leaders were honest and were to say, like back in 2012 or 2015, if they were honest, they were to say like, oh yeah, we're not going to reach this mark. We're not going to reach 1.5 degrees Celsius. We're going to really work hard to reaching, like, let's say, I don't know, 3 degrees Celsius, and then claw our way back and really work on that because, the goal of 1.5 was kind of unrealistic. Instead, we've got all of these beautiful lies and all of these beautiful corporate selected wordings and phrases that soothed us and numbed us. And now here we are, 2023, 2024, and 2025 becoming the hottest years on record in like nearly a 200 year, like 170 something or 175 years of tracking. Like, imagine, you know, like, it's not just cute that the fact that we have longer summers and we don't have, cold winters. We're supposed to have cold winters. We're supposed to have a cooler summers. We're supposed to have proper seasons and weather. And instead, in so many ways, it has shifted and became unpredictable. Now there are climate emergencies and issues that are happening in places that they've never experienced it before. The fundamental behavior of the planet is changing, and it is all of our fault. Mine, yours, and everyone but mostly, of course, it's these big corporations and governments and entities that failed to do their job because they have the power to do that. They just choose not to do anything about it. So what now? What, what now? And it's a tough question to ask and answer because, what can we do? Is there much we can do? There's a few things we can do, and by we I mean especially governments and whatnot. Let's look at these conferences first, right? I think all of these climate conferences really need to ban any and all fossil fuel executives from ever attending these places. These energy ministries, they really need to work for the benefit of their people, not their wallets, and really think strategically long term because there are kids, grandkids, great grandkids, great great grandkids to think about. They've yet to be born, but we have to think about them. The governments really need to phase out all of the subsidies and for these fossil fuels companies. If they want to keep drilling, it has to be on their dime, only their dime. Why is my money going onto that for that? I did not agree to that, so the governments should really have to phase it all away and out so that we don't sponsor our own demise. And we also have to remember that there are a lot of climate vulnerable countries that have contributed the least to this crisis, but they stand to lose the most due to this climate crisis, like island nations like Bahamas, Maldives. All of these islands, they are at risk of drowning essentially, but we're not doing anything about it because we just want to drill, baby, drill. And I think there needs to be a societal change in a psyche. Like, for example, look at China, a country that is big, a country that has 1 billion people, a country that did not have clean air for a long ass time, and now has the cleanest air, some of the cleanest air, spearheading the adoption of green technology and energy. Like, majority of their cars are electric now. No emissions. And then there are some other countries that are like, no, we're going to drill more. We're going to get rid of solar. We're going to get rid of nuclear. We're going to build more oil. And we're going to sell more gasoline cars. And in fact, we're gonna do our best to deregulate the gasoline requirements because pollution, nobody cares about it. So, what can you do on your own individual level, like you and I? Not much, to be honest, not much. Recycling doesn't really work, but still, recycle. Still do your best to recycle. You know, if you can have reusable bags, use those. But also reach out to your government officials. Reach out to any one of them and be like, and consistently reach out to them and be like, hey, you have the power. I'm your constituent. You have to vote for green whatever legislation. You have to stop subsidizing these companies. And then you as a consumer can also try to stop shopping at these heavy pollutant companies. And again, it's very difficult to completely go ahead and stop shopping with them because what choice do we really have? But we can reduce our dependence on it. For example, if you have like, I don't know, Amazon Prime, cancel it. You don't need it. You don't need your pair of whatever be delivered in the next day. You can wait a little longer. If you have multiple items, don't have them shipped every day. Have them shipped later, but in one big bulk package. You know, try to utilize public transportation versus a single car because one car can only fit so many people, like what, 4 people, whereas a bus can fit like 20, 30 people. And let me tell you about trains, honey. Trains are beautiful and amazing. You can take them anywhere. Takes longer, much longer than a plane, but it's also more beautiful. It really is. But again, the power, the biggest chunk of this power lies with the government officials and the corporate leaders. So, you know what hurts them? Money. So if you withdraw your money, your hard-earned money from these companies, maybe they will listen. But also, just on your individual level, go and enjoy nature. Really get out of the city, get out of your suburbia, go and hug a tree. Really try to remember that we live on one of the most beautiful and unique creations this solar system has ever seen. A planet Earth. A planet that carries all of us. It carries me, it carries you, it carries all of the birds, it carries all of the trees. In fact, this planet, like, had it been, I don't know, like a centimeter or an inch closer to the sun or further away from the sun, none of it would have existed. None of us would have ever been born. We're so supremely lucky to live on such a beautiful planet. It would be a big shame to lose it. Because the thing is, yeah, we will fly to Mars. We will have our colonies on Mars, on Moon, and other celestial bodies. But Earth, we have to keep it. It's our home. It's our home country. Think of it this way, right? Why not to protect it? Think about it. Anyway, I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.